Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secrets Show with your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin. His book, titled Lies I Taught in Medical School, is a New York Times bestseller. See the show notes for a link to download a free chapter. And now, please enjoy this week's episode as we look at the power of functional medicine with Dr. Mark Hyman.
Ever wondered if we can truly turn back the clock on aging? Join us in this compelling episode as Dr. Mark Hyman shares his extraordinary insights on the power of functional medicine to rejuvenate the body and mind at any age. Discover how Mark's personal and professional journey led him to uncover the foundational causes of aging and chronic disease, and learn about the vital distinctions between beneficial and harmful stress. We also delve into the fascinating concept of biological versus chronological aging that we've talked about before on this show, and the transformative potential of lifestyle choices in reversing biological age. Our discussion takes a critical look at the current healthcare system also, and medical education systems. We shed light on how profit-driven motives can undermine simple, effective treatments. Mark introduces the concept of hormesis, explaining how small, beneficial stresses like intermittent fasting, cold showers, and saunas can activate the body's innate healing mechanisms. We underscore the crucial role of modern nutritional science in medical education, arguing for a more integrated approach that places lifestyle and diet at the core of health management. In our final deep dive, we explore the complex relationship between aging, inflammation, and nutrition. Mark discusses the hallmarks of aging and the importance of balancing what the body has too much of and what it lacks. This includes the impact of refined oils versus traditional oils, the benefits of higher protein intake for older adults, and the emerging technology of continuous glucose monitors. We also touch on the profound influence of social connections on health and longevity. You don't want to miss this episode. This episode is brought to you by L-Nutra, maker of the Prolong fasting mimicking diet. If you'd like to try it, use the link in the show notes for 20% off. What if your routine CT calcium scan could tell you even more? Now from a single scan, you get 4 powerful reports, not just your coronary artery calcium score, but also your arterial age, liver fat levels, and bone mineral density, with no added radiation or time. It's early detection made smarter, spotting heart disease, metabolic dysfunction, and bone loss before symptoms begin. And now it's available anywhere in the US, no prescription needed. 1 scan, 4 reports, life-saving insight. Use the code Lufkin20 for 20% off.
And now, please enjoy this week's episode.
Welcome, Mark, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. And my co-host, Dr. Rob Lufkin.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited.
Before we really dive into the subject really deeply, can you tell us a little bit about how you got interested in the area of aging and longevity?
Well, I'm getting older. Out of self-interest, and actually jokingly, but in part that's true. And it's just a natural consequence of digging into the root causes of why we get sick and how we age. And functional medicine has been the work of my life. And through that lens, I've been able to understand where we're headed in medicine, what's emerging and what's important, and how we begin to rethink what we're doing from the perspective of creating health as a way of treating disease rather than suppressing disease or aging with some intervention that interrupts something in the body. How do we activate the body's own innate healing system?
Mm-hmm.
I love asking our speakers, and this is a question we ask just about everybody. Before we get into the details of it, let's step back and maybe just tell us, Mark, how you conceive of longevity and aging, why we age. What's the framework you use for that?
I think we've come a long way in our understanding of the biology of aging. It was thought of as this normal, inevitable consequence that we grow old, decrepit, frail, and get chronic diseases as we get older. But the truth is that our biology has the capacity to regenerate, rejuvenate, repair, and reverse our biological age at any time, whether we're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 or more, we have that innate capacity. So unlocking that has really fascinated me. And I've seen just remarkable things in my practice, reversing what seem to be end stage diseases, heart failure, kidney failure, late stage diabetes, and seeing what would be thought to be miracles, but they're not. They're just inevitable consequences of understanding the nature of biology and the laws of biology and how we can activate the body's own healing system through understanding what causes imbalance in the body and how to restore balance, which is really the fundamental framework of functional medicine. Take out the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, and let the body do the rest.
Yeah, but it's really great and motivating to know that you have found ways of reversing some of these processes, of overcoming what a lot of people think are inevitable. I'm wondering, in terms of body and mind and what you're saying, what role do you think stress plays in this process?
Oh, well, I mean, stress is a ubiquitous phenomena, and it's not necessarily bad. It's in fact, some stresses actually help you live longer. In our thermoregulated, environmentally controlled, perfect worlds, where we've sort of absolved ourselves from having to do physical work, from extremes of temperature and shifts in our ability to find food, we basically create an environment that's bad for us. And so I don't think necessarily stress is bad. I think it's the mental stress that is the result of our thoughts and our beliefs and our ideas that often create the most harm. Stress is not necessarily what happens to us, it's what we make of what happens to us. It's not the reality of what happens to us, it's the perception of the reality of what happens to us. And the biology of this is very, really clear. I don't know if it was Herbert Benson or somebody in medicine just defines stress as the real or imagined threat to your body or your ego. So it could be a real threat to your body, such as somebody having a gun to your head, or it could be that you think your wife is cheating on you, but she's really not, and you still have the same physiological response. So learning how to master our minds is a key part of maintaining our health throughout our lives. And actually, mindset and meaning and purpose are really, happiness and optimism are really key parts of longevity.
Right.
Yeah, I love what you said about the event almost itself being neutral, and then the meaning we assign to it can either create stress or not stress, depending on how we interpret it in some cases. That's an interesting concept. Yeah. Backing up a little bit, you mentioned biological aging. Can you define that and versus maybe chronological aging, and then also what are your go-to tools to measure biological aging? It's an area that's evolving very fast now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, chronologically, we're getting older. We can't do anything about that. I was born in 1959, and every day I get chronologically older. The question is, how is my biological age progressing or not? And I recently tested my biological age. I'm 63, and I'm biologically 43. So I think that's a really interesting phenomena that we can actually get chronologically older as we get biologically younger. I tested my biological age through a technique called DNA methylation, which is really relatively new type of test that measures our epigenome, which is really the piano player that plays the keyboard, which is our genes. And that determines our health or determines our level of disease or rate of aging. And so we have enormous influence over our epigenome. We can't change our genes, they're fixed unless we do gene editing or CRISPR, but we can change the expression of our genes by what we eat, by what we think, by how we move, by our environment, by toxins or removing them, by a level of nutrient density in our diet, by how we manage stress. All these things are read in our book of life and are literally read into our genes. And so we have enormous power at any age to transform that. And a lot of the research around longevity now is focused on the epigenetics of aging and how we can modify that through our environment and lifestyle. And that's really where the hope is, that a lot of the things that we see as normal aging are really abnormal aging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wonder, do you see, you mentioned the DNA methylation, sort of the epigenetic clocks, are very popular sort of in longevity. Do you see those assuming a clinical role soon?
Absolutely.
Or currently?
Absolutely.
And,
I mean, I use them in my clinical practice. Absolutely. I think, there are many ways to measure our biological age that are not a true biological age, but are some indirect indicators, which we do all the time. We measure your cholesterol, your blood sugar, your blood pressure. We measure your hormone levels, and we measure your nutrient levels. And there's all kinds of ways we can look at your biological functioning and see where you are on the spectrum of wellness to disease, right? So that's what functional medicine is really good at. But what's really exciting is these new technologies that have been able to measure things like DNA methylation or telomere length or telomerase activity, which are more reflective of the rate of biological aging, and are a metric which can be used to assess how you age and how what you're doing affects how you age. And so let's say you start on a lifestyle or diet program or supplement or medication. How do you measure your rate of biological aging? Well, now there are tools and techniques to actually do this clinically, which can help you identify whether you're on the right track or not. So this is what I do with myself and with my practice for sure.
Yeah, very exciting time.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if was this the baseline reading you took where you found out you were 20 years biologically?
Yeah, that was my first try.
First try.
So I'm going to try to get to 25. We'll see how it goes, but I'll keep you posted.
Well, I know in your work, food is very important. In fact, you said food is the most powerful drug on the planet. As a psychologist and knowing about addiction and drugs, that resonated with me, because I know we can use drugs in a good way, we can use drugs in a bad way. So what is your perspective on that?
Well, I think, we underestimate the power of the molecules and information in food to regulate our biology every day. We don't almost think twice about what we're eating, except does it taste good or how does it make us feel in the moment. We don't understand that we're not eating just for energy or pleasure. We're eating to regulate every single function of our bodies. It's the most important thing we do every day to interact with our world. And it's transmuted into biological signals that control every aspect of your health, your microbiome, your immune system, your energy system, how you make energy in your cells, your detoxification system, your circulation, blood vessel health, your hormones and communication systems and neurotransmitters, your structural system, what you're made of. All these things are influenced by food. And they regulate so many different functions of your body. So when we see chronic illnesses, I'll just tell you a quick story about the power of food. And this is in my book, Young Forever. I share this story there of a patient who came to the Cleveland Clinic at 66 years old with a body mass index of 43. I mean, that's really, really obese. She, is basically normal is 25 or less, 30 is obese, 40 is severely obese. She had type 2 diabetes for 10 years on insulin. She had heart failure. She had kidneys were failing. Her liver was failing. Blood pressure was high. And she had multiple stents put in her heart and was on a pile of medications and was not doing well, even though she was having her disease managed by the best doctors in the world. They were doing the right thing according to our current paradigm. And rather than try to tweak her medications or adjust her dosages, I said, why don't we try a different approach? And she joined a group we have at Cleveland Clinic called Functioning for Life, and was able to actually transform her health very quickly using food. And she radically changed her diet from eating an ultra-processed food diet that was high in starch and sugar to whole foods, low glycemic, anti-inflammatory, low sugar starch, higher fat diet. And within 3 days, she was off her insulin. In 3 months, she reversed her heart failure, her diabetes, her A1C, both, you're the doctor, Rob, it was 11. It went to 5.5, which is, unheard of. If you have a medication that drops it by 1 point, it's like a blockbuster drug. And we're talking here about 6 and they're points, and it's algorithmic. So it's not linear points. And she reversed her heart failure again, something we never see in traditional medicine, reversed her kidney failure again, never something we see in traditional medicine. Her fatty liver resolved, her blood pressure normalized, she got off all her medications. Her copay was $20,000 a year. She got off everything, lost 43 pounds in 3 months, and ended up losing 116 pounds a year, and completely reversed everything at 63 years old, or 66 years old. That's the power of food. There's no drug that works as well as that. There isn't. If there was, I would prescribe it. I have no righteousness about medication or pharmaceuticals. I use them all the time. The question is, what's the right drug for this problem? And 90% of the time, it's food.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story, Mark. I wonder, And I've heard that in other settings as well, how these chronic diseases, which we're treating the symptoms of with drugs and surgery, the root cause can be reversed with lifestyle changes, and particularly food is arguably the most powerful one. I always wonder, and I'm still involved at medical school now, teaching people, and I see what's going on. I see what's being taught. Why aren't people shouting this from the rafters that, you know, we've got a cure, or not even we've got a cure,
no
but
one gets rich selling broccoli. I mean, I think Pfizer just announced that it increased the price of COVID vaccines 10,000%. Now, this just doesn't make any sense, right? And I think we're in a profit-driven healthcare system that often ignores the simplest, most effective, and inexpensive treatments in favor of things that actually don't work that well and that cost a lot and have downstream negative consequences. So I think you know, we have an antiquated healthcare system. We have an antiquated medical education system. My daughter's in medical school right now, and it's staggering to me what she's not learning. I mean, you know, it's like you know, by the time a textbook's written, it's outdated. But the truth is that most of our textbooks are not just outdated. It's like we're learning about the world is flat and our world is round world. And I think that's really, you know, it's really criminal given the level of understanding we have now about biology. The entrenchment of our healthcare system in the old medical paradigm is really frightening. It sort of reminds me of Semmelweis, who discovered that washing hands could prevent childbirth fever and the death of his patients in labor and delivery. You know, he was ridiculed for thinking that and was banished from medicine and ended up dying, you know, just in disgrace. And it took 50 years for doctors to go, oh yeah, I guess we should wash our hands before doing surgery. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at now.
Well, I mean, yeah, I certainly understand the pernicious incentives and the financial motivations from the drug companies and all the factors that are lining up. But I mean, what about the young medical students that are idealistic? They're just not being taught. I mean, are they maybe not exposed to this?
No, I mean, they're trying themselves. My daughter's like, hey, Dad, there's a food as medicine study group at my medical school the students put together. I'm like, yeah, okay, great. And that should be part of your curriculum. It shouldn't be something they have to do on the side. You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love your quote that every bite of food you take is like instructions that control the operating system of your biology. I think it's sort of like somebody else said, is the way we program our epigenome is with each piece of food we take is programming our epigenetics for better or worse, you know, depending on the food we take.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you talk about hormesis. Can you explain what it is and how it can be activated?
Yeah. So you know, one of the exciting things about our understanding of biology is that we have an innate immune and healing system. We have an innate system that is designed to rejuvenate, repair, and fix our biology, and it's activated by stress. And historically, we lived in a world where we were constantly exposed to different kinds of stresses: heat stress, cold stress, hunger stress, exercise stress, and it turns out that these kinds of stresses actually help us. If you are in extreme stress for too long, it will kill you, right? If your body is immersed in 40-degree Fahrenheit water for too long, you will get hypothermia and die. But if you do it for 3 or 4 minutes, it activates your body into a response that creates healing and builds your innate immune system, activates your brown fat, it increases dopamine, increases focus, energy, helps your metabolism in many ways. So there's so many benefits to these different kinds of little stresses that we have insulated ourselves from. So hormesis is the idea that we should practice little stresses every day to activate our body's own healing system. So what are those kinds of stresses? Well, first one is diet and what you're eating and how you're eating and when you're eating and what you're eating. The easiest form of hormesis is just taking a break from eating for a little bit. And I'm not talking about fasting for a week. I'm talking about 12 hours, which most of us don't do. We eat when we go to bed and we eat when we wake up. So taking a 12, 14-hour, even 16-hour fast every day, overnight fast, which means 8 of those hours you're sleeping, it's not so hard. So if you eat dinner at 6 at night, you could eat at 8 in the morning. That's a 14-hour fast, right? That creates a little bit of stress and starvation in the body. that then activates the body's own repair systems called autophagy, which means self-eating or cannibalism, that helps your body recycle and repair old parts and cleans up old waste. And that's really important for longevity and for healing the body. And then what we eat is really important. There's a whole world of science around phytohormesis, which are the plant compounds, the phytochemicals in plants that actually bind to different receptors and pathways that create a little bit of a stress, like a little bit of a toxin, but that activate these ancient and built-in systems that enhance longevity and reverse biological aging. And then there's other stresses that we can easily do, like take a cold shower for 2 minutes in the morning, get a cold plunge, which may be a little more expensive, but or you just get an ice, like some guy got a trough that you buy for next to nothing at the animal feed store, filled with water and ice cubes, and sits in that for 3 minutes. Sauna, again, another powerful way to increase our stress to our body through heat stress that creates heat shock proteins that help repair damaged proteins, that helps activate our innate immune system, that help our bodies reduce inflammation and improve our heart variability, reduce stress in our systems, and have a really powerful effect. And sauna users, for example, in Finland have a 40% reduction in death rates because of using saunas, for example. Or we can do other forms of hormesis like exercise. That's a great form of hormesis, where we stress our bodies. When you weight lift, you tear muscles, and that's a form of injury or stress to the system, but then you build back stronger. Same thing with interval training, where you do high intensity interval training, where you run really fast for like a minute, and then you're gonna run from a tiger, but then you rest for 3 minutes, slowly walking. That you do that for half an hour and repeat, and that activates something called improvements in your VO2 max, which is really critical for longevity and is again another beneficial stress. And then there's other kinds of stress like hypoxia. You can get a breathing mask for $50 online that you can use while you're sitting at your desk that limits your flow of oxygen, and you can use that for periods of time to create hypoxia, which causes inducible hypoxia factors, which are again reparative. We can also use other forms like hyperbaric oxygen, which has been shown to kill zombie cells, which are part of the aging process, that spew out inflammation and that increase your telomere length by using hyperbaric oxygen, which is basically a pressure chamber where you are basically under the water, 2 atmospheres, equivalent of 2 atmospheres of pressure and 100% oxygen, which is a stress to the body, and that creates a healing response. Ozone is another therapy. So there's many of these kinds of therapies that are available to us. Some are easy to get to, and some are a little bit more challenging or expensive, but they're around, and those are the kinds of things that really activate their body's healing system. So I make sure I activate some type of hormesis every day.
What is it about the stress or the exercise or the event that takes it from beneficial to harmful? Like a little bit of stress is beneficial, but chronic stress is harmful. A little bit of exercise, or moderate exercise is good, but too much is harmful. What's the difference?
To paraphrase Paracelsus, the dose makes the poison, right? So I think you've got to find that Goldilocks version of the stress. If you again stay in the sauna too long, you'll die of heat stroke. If you stay in a cold plunge too long, you'll die of hypothermia. If you have hypoxia too long, you'll run out of oxygen. If you're in a hyperbaric chamber too long, you'll get oxygen toxicity from being in too high oxygen state. So it's just really about finding that perfect dose of use. Don't eat for 16 hours or 24, 36 hours, you're fine. If you don't eat for a month, you're dead. So it's really about finding that Goldilocks version.
It's what we call the inverted U-shaped curve, which is a very common relationship where you need a certain amount of whatever the stimulus is to activate, but then if you go too far past it, then you bring that curve back down. So stress and performance, the challenges that you're talking about, you want to challenge the body is what I'm hearing, but you want to do it within a certain framework where you're not overloading the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the emphasis of this program is on inflammaging and inflammation. Could you talk about how inflammation drives aging, or how the hallmarks of aging are affected by inflammation?
Yeah. Well, first of all, inflammation is something we're all familiar with. It's this process where there's pain and inflammation which leads to swelling and heat, and it's sort of the classic signs of inflammation. But what's really going on is more sterile chronic inflammation in the body that's influencing all the diseases that we see today in the world, from depression to cancer to obesity to diabetes to heart disease, autoimmune diseases, obviously, and more. And these are all driven by these underlying factors that are driving inflammation. Our diet, our inflammatory diet, which is high in processed foods, our sedentary lifestyle, our chronic stress levels, environmental toxins, changes to our microbiome. All these things are driving inflammation. And so that has a sort of massive effect throughout the body. And as we begin to understand the process of aging, scientists talk about the hallmarks of aging. And some say there's 9, I say there's 10, I include the microbiome. But essentially, these are all things that go wrong as a result of various insults in the body, or insults to the body, or lack of certain things we need to thrive, like good food and sleep and the right nutrients, et cetera. And so inflammation is kind of a common unifying theory around a lot of this. And all the hallmarks of aging are both caused by and can cause inflammation. So they're really inseparable. And the hallmarks of aging are, I think you might or may not be familiar with. They're things like damage to our DNA, problems with our epigenome, mitochondrial injury, proteins that are messed up and not folded properly or injured, problems with our nutrient sensing systems. This is one of the essential features, and it also drives a lot of inflammation, which is how we regulate our responses to proteins and sugars and things in our diet that regulate the aging process. So too much sugar and starch, which is the predominant source of our calories in our diet today, drives these inflammation pathways, and that makes this process of inflammaging worse. And so, we have all these ways, and even the microbiome, is a huge source of inflammation because of our toxic diet, and that affects our microbiome, and that creates changes in the rest of our biology that drives inflammation. So inflammaging is this common unifying theory, but it's both the cause and the effect. It's both causes a lot of the other hallmarks of aging, but it's caused by a lot of the other hallmarks of aging. So it's really one. I mean, it's not really good to call them all separate. They're really one interlocking set of problems that, if you deal with the root causes upstream to the hallmarks of aging, you deal with all of them. So a lot of the science now around longevity is focused on treating the hallmarks of aging, which I think is a big improvement, and seeing aging as a disease, which I think is a big improvement, but it doesn't really address the underlying phenomena that the hallmarks of aging have a cause, right? What is the cause of the cause of aging? And that's where functional medicine comes in, and the framework of understanding what you're basically dying too much of or too little of. You're dying too much bad food, too much stress, too much toxins, too much allergens, microbes, etc. And you're dying of too little of the right things, too little of the right nutrients and the right high quality phytochemically rich diet and the right amount of sleep and movement and et cetera. So it really, functional medicine helps us get to the root causes of the causes. And that's what's so important. And that's why it's such a radically different approach to aging.
Yeah. You mentioned how important and powerful nutrition can be in decreasing inflammation, and certainly the role of avoiding sugars and refined carbohydrates, starches, all those things to decrease inflammation. Do you think following a diet that lowers those, is there any additional value for being in ketosis, where you've actually switched your metabolic switch to fat burning?
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to activate hormesis, right? Which is this idea that it sort of mimics starvation. So we know from the research that the only thing that really extends life in animal models is calorie restriction, which is if you eat a third less calories, you live a third longer. So that's like 120 years old. But no one's going to want to do that because they're going to be hungry and irritable and have no sex drive and be frail, and it's not a good thing. So the question is, how do we activate or mimic calorie restriction? And that's where we talk about time restricted eating or intermittent fasting or fasting mimicking diets. And ketogenic diets are another form, because historically, when we ran out of food, we have about 2,500 calories, which is basically a day's worth of calories in our muscles stored as glycogen from carbohydrate. We probably have 50, I don't know, maybe depending on who you are, 100,000 or more calories stored as fat in our body. And that can, when our body can start to break down that fat, it can use that as fuel. The body is like a hybrid car. It can run on gas or electric. Gas is like dirty burning fuel, carbohydrates, and fat is clean burning fuel, like electric. And so when you eat a ketogenic diet, which historically we didn't eat a ketogenic diet, we just didn't eat, right? So we'd go into ketosis when we were kind of hunt and gather, we didn't find something to eat. We shift into this state of hormesis, which activates our body in the same ways as these other forms of starvation. So we end up activating our anti-inflammatory systems, DNA repair systems. We silence mTOR, we increase autophagy, we fix our mitochondria, increase mitochondrial biogenesis. We do all these things that basically create health as a consequence to make us stay alive. So we kick in all of our repair and healing mechanisms when we do that. Now the question is, do we stay in ketosis all the time? Is it good to be on all the time? And I think from an evolutionary point of view, we never were. We would eat and then we would starve, and then we'd eat and we'd starve. So I think probably cyclical ketosis is not a bad idea, or any of these other techniques. And we're still trying to thread the needle on what that is. And there are drugs which are mimicking that, like rapamycin, being studied for longevity. But I think we're still in the early stages of trying to figure all that out.
Yeah, I want to talk more about rapamycin and mTOR in a bit, but before we leave the before we leave the nutrition part, I think the consensus is pretty strong about sugars and refined carbohydrates. Avoiding those to drive inflammation. There are a couple other things I wanted to get your take on. Is some people also, in addition to avoiding refined sugars and refined carbohydrates and sugars, they also avoid what are called seed oils or industrial oils, canola oil, rapeseed, all those things as drivers of inflammation. How do you feel about that? Is that important to do, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is, we always consumed these oils, but in their original states, right? We eat the beans or the seeds or the nuts or sources of these oils that were found in whole foods. What we've done, in the last 100+ years is we've invented this refining process where we've pressed and extracted through heat and solvents these oils from various plants that are really kind of unknown to our biology, in the sense, for example, soybean oil has increased 1,000-fold in its consumption in the last 100 years. So that, when you see something like that, I'm like, is that really good for us? And I think, in general, a little bit's not going to be bad. And many of the observational studies show that it's good for you. I think there's a real challenge with nutrition science. It's hard to do good experiments with people. It's hard to do good experiments because you can't, lock 10,000 people up for 30 years in a room and another 10,000 people in another room and feed them 2 different diets and see what happens, which would be the best thing to do. This is never going to happen. So we kind of have to extrapolate. And that's why there's so much nutritional confusion in the literature. Personally, I think that, the main oils we should be consuming are olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, which is an oil that's more monounsaturated. It's a higher temperature heat. Some coconut oil, depending on your health and lipids and your genetics, some people can tolerate more saturated fat, and I don't think it's the boogeyman that it was thought to be. So coconut oil can be helpful. Animal fats typically are fine for most people. I think the whole idea of cholesterol and animal fat that's been really well debunked from the literature in terms of its cardiovascular effects. In fact, there are trials from Sarah Hallmarks and others where they put type 2 diabetics on ketogenic diets, basically butter and coconut oil and other fats and super high fat, 75% fat diets, and every single one of their cardiovascular biomarkers got better or were neutral. So I think there's really good evidence that in interventional trials that there's really little harm, especially in metabolically unhealthy people. So my personal opinion is I don't consume those oils. I avoid them. They're ubiquitous in processed foods. We don't actually even think we're consuming them because we may not use them in our kitchen, although people do. Vegetable oil, corn oil, soybean oil, canola oils, all these oils. I typically stay away from them, and I think I consume them in their whole food forms. I think we do need them, and the people who I've seen have extremely high imbalances in omega-3s and omega-6. When you have too much omega-6, it can create problems with the function of the omega-3 fats. So you kind of, in a way, invalidate the omega-3 fats. So it's not bad to have omega-6s. We need them. They're essential fatty acids, but it's just about really the right ratio and balance.
And one last food question. One other area people talk about is grains, and even people who don't have full-blown gluten intolerance or celiac disease. Do you recommend avoiding grains themselves, whole grains or any kind of grains, as drivers of inflammation?
Well, I mean, there's two questions there. If you have celiac disease, you should definitely avoid gluten. There's no question about that from anybody in medicine. Grains as a whole are not all gluten grains. You can eat black rice, you can eat buckwheat, you can eat amaranth, quinoa. These are all ancient grains that can be helpful. However, when you are metabolically very unhealthy, which is about 93% of Americans, the more even of these quote healthful grains that you consume, they can be problematic. So, one of the things that's emerging that I really think is fabulous is the ability to monitor our own biomarkers in real time. So now we have continuous glucose monitors. You can measure your blood sugar. And so you can stick a little thing on your arm, the patch, and have this continuous read of your blood sugar. And you can see if I eat a cup of rice, what does that do? If I eat a cup of quinoa, what does that do? So some people can tolerate it, but other people, it is a problem. And for people who are in the extreme ends, like type 2 diabetes, I don't think they should have any grains or beans until they're able to reverse their type 2 diabetes, and then they can broaden their diet. So I'm not an extremist, but I do think in certain situations you need a more aggressive approach, and that may include limiting grains and beans.
Yeah, thank you. We're talking about what can impact our biology. We're talking about hormesis and different challenges, but you've also talked about the power of community and love to actually change our biology. Can you expand on that?
Sure. There's a whole new field emerging that it's called sociogenomics, which is the understanding of how our social connections and interactions influence our gene expression. And we know from these data points that if you're lonely or isolated or disconnected, don't have physical touch or community, that you age faster, that you die sooner, that is an extreme high risk factor for all kinds of diseases and death. And that if you have community and you have connection and you have meaning and purpose, that you live longer. And so we understand not only just this from a population-based study perspective, but actually from the mechanistic perspective. And I traveled to Sardinia and Icaria as part of the Blue Zones. My friend Dan Buettner introduced me to people there, and I got to really see inside these people's lives. And they have such deep sense of meaning and purpose and connection and community. They're not stressed all the time and busy all the time, and they just want to sit and chat and hang out and enjoy each other, enjoy life. And it's like we kind of miss that in this culture. We're always like driving, going, doing, being productive, and rather than just being and enjoying life. So I feel like we're in a very interesting moment where we need to kind of rethink our values as a society and start to bring back some of those values of community and love and connection.
Yeah. So that it sort of resonates with my model of resilience, where relationship is a very important component, as well as having purpose in your life. So it fits with what you're saying.
For sure.
Yeah, that's so important. Well, maybe I can go from love and community and kind of go back to another question. What are the most promising longevity compounds? And from a functional medicine doctor, what are you excited about?
I mean, honestly, food. But I think within food, there's a framework of understanding these phytochemicals and this whole emerging field of phytohormesis, which is the idea that within the plant world and even within animals who eat those plants, when you eat those animals or their milk or cheese, actually contain these very powerful compounds from nature that we've co-evolved with that regulate our biology and can have really remarkable effects. For example, phycetin in strawberries, which is a compound that seems to activate many of the positive nutrient sensing pathways that we want to activate properly when we want to think about longevity. For example, like senolytic processes, which we kill these zombie cells, or we increase autophagy, or we decrease inflammation through inhibiting NF-kappa B, or we increase mitochondrial biogenesis and function, meaning we increase our energy system function. These compounds really do that, and they can come from green tea, from red grape skin, or pterostilbene, which is another compound, curcumin. One of my favorite compounds is something called quercetin and some of the bioflavonoids that are found in Himalayan tartary buckwheat as a plant, which you can eat as a pancakes, believe it or not, or as a supplement. But in that, there's something called 2-jojoba, which is an immunorejuvenating compound that's found nowhere else in nature. Big Bolt Health makes it. Jeffrey Bland, my mentor, has founded that company. And so there are all kinds of these magical compounds in food that we can use, from green tea catechins to curcumin, and these have real promise. And I tend to consume these foods as much as I can. I tend to take supplements with them in them. But then there's a whole class of pharmaceuticals that are being explored, and two of the most promising ones have to do with regulating two of the nutrient sensing pathways that are part of one of the hallmarks of aging, mTOR and AMPK. And so one of them is called Rapamycin. It's a compound that was discovered in Rapa Nui in the 60s. Rapa Nui is Easter Island, where they have these weird statues that I think aliens brought down or something. I don't know how they got there, but they found that on the back of these statues there was this compound that we thought maybe it was an antifungal or had other properties but wasn't so good, and they found it maybe was helpful in transplant medicine for immune modulation. But then we discovered it regulates this ancient survival pathway called mTOR, which is needed to build muscle for protein synthesis, but also it needs to be silenced at moments to increase autophagy, which is the recycling repair system we talked about. And so this drug, rapamycin, which is named after Rapa Nui, that binds this receptor called mTOR, which is named after the drug called mammalian target of rapamycin, it actually seems to extend life in animals and reverse a lot of the biological signs of aging and the hallmarks of aging. So should we all be taking rapamycin? Probably not. I think there's still a lot of research that needs to be done. There's a lot of questions about the dosage, the safety, the frequency, the timing. There's a lot of companies. I just talked to the CEO of one of them today who are creating rapamycin analogs that may be better with less side effects. So that's a really exciting compound. I think another one is metformin. I'm a little dubious about it. It works on a pathway called AMPK, which regulates insulin resistance and used for diabetes. But all the studies I've seen on metformin is that it actually works, but it doesn't work as well as lifestyle. So it's like people are like, oh, I'm going to take this drug and I'm going to change my diet. Well, no. I mean, in the large diabetes prevention trial, over 1,000 people, they found that people who lived a healthy lifestyle, and it was actually a really crappy diet for diabetes. It was a low-fat diet, but they had other supports and exercise and group meetings and healthier food. But it was low fat, which is not the right diet for diabetics. It still was far better than metformin and nothing. So, there was a 58% reduction in progression of diabetes with people doing that versus a 31% reduction with metformin. So, even, and if you, for example, would do a study on like Sarah Hallberg's work and you look at maybe a 60% reversal of diabetes, not just prevention, 100% reduction in some of the main medications, 12% weight loss. I mean, just staggering numbers. If you were to use that kind of diet with these people, you'd see probably, metformin would look like it barely had a blip on the graph in terms of efficacy. So I'm a little dubious. There's a big trial going on now, the pain trial, which is coming out. It's not without side effects. It does have some adverse effects on mitochondria. So I kind of don't like the idea of that. Rapamycin, I'm more optimistic about, but again, I think there needs to be some more research and maybe the use of some derivative compounds that don't have the side effects. But I mean, the longevity research is just accelerating at a rapid pace.
Yeah. You mentioned mTOR, and how do you reconcile the need as we grow older to silence mTOR with also the need to maintain, grow muscle?
Yeah. So this is the thing, you've got this pathway that's essential for building muscle, which is the currency of aging. And sarcopenia, which means loss of muscle, is really what people die from, like from frailty and weakness and the metabolic consequences of replacing muscle with fat, even if you're normal weight as you get older. So keeping your muscle mass is critical as you get older. But it's also important to increase autophagy, which is the ability of the body to recycle and repair and clean up old parts. So we both need the demo team and the construction team, right? and it's got to be a balance. So a lot of people say, oh, you should be vegan because you want to silence mTOR and you want to fast all the time. I'm like, well, no. I mean, you need times where you're actually building muscle, and you need times where you're not. And so within the course of a day, not that hard to do. You just, do a 12, 14, 16-hour fast, right? Overnight fast. And then you work out, and then you have a load of good quality protein that activates mTOR for muscle synthesis. And it's the surest way to maintain and keep your muscle. And then having adequate amounts of protein throughout the day at each meal with the right amounts of leucine. Now, leucine is an amino acid that's found more in animal protein, lower in plant proteins. And, you have to eat a ton of plant protein to eat the equivalent in terms of its leucine and branched chain amino acids, which are critical for protein synthesis. So people who just don't understand this say, well, you can get all your protein from animal plants. Well, yes, but you have to have 6 cups of brown rice to get the equivalent of a 4 ounce of chicken. Nobody's gonna eat 6 cups of brown rice, or 2 cups of beans. So I think you just have to be realistic about the dose and the quality of the protein, and you need to modify your diet as you get older. And even studies that may suggest that having lower protein when you're younger is better, they all show that when you get older, it's not. It's really important to have high quality protein. And the ProAge study, which is a big survey of all the science on protein and aging and muscle mass and sarcopenia by leading aging researchers, leading protein experts in the world, all came to the same conclusion. We need not just 0.8 grams per kilo, but we probably need 1.2 to 2 grams per kilo, depending on our activity level, to build and maintain muscle as we get older. And yet, we have to, again, also give breaks and activate autophagy. And there may be compounds like rapamycin that we can begin to take that actually even accelerate the autophagy and kind of thread the needle a little bit. So it's kind of an exciting time, but I think people need to understand that you can't go extreme one way or the other.
Are you using rapamycin with your patients or in your group currently?
Not yet. No, I think it's still too experimental. I mean, there are biohackers who are using it. There are leading aging researchers who are taking it. I think it's definitely very fascinating, but I think it also has side effects. So I think, like the drug, it's like I say, eat lots of strawberries from, wild strawberries, which are high concentrations of phycetin. You're not going to get into trouble doing that, right?
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of time. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you're particularly excited about that we need to cover here?
I mean, I think the message I would love people to take home is that we're at this really exciting transitional point in medicine where for the first time we understand the laws of biology and how to activate our body's own healing system. And it's not by treating disease, it's by creating health. And functional medicine is the framework for doing that. My book, Young Forever, The Secret of Living Your Healthiest, Longest Life, is really packed with the science of how this works and what's at the root cause of aging and the root cause of the hallmarks of aging, and give you a very practical sense of tools and a pathway and a roadmap to follow that actually will help activate all these healing systems and reverse the biological age.
Yeah, we usually end by asking you 1 or 2 things that people can do to improve their longevity, but I'm so pleased that you've been giving us a whole menu of things throughout our talk. So that's really great. I really appreciate that.
Of course.
How can people reach you if they wanted to learn more about your work?
Well, they can find me on my podcast, The Doctor's Pharmacy with an F. My website is Dr. Mark Hyman. I'm sorry, drhyman.com. And on social media, it's just Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Mark Hyman. And they'll have more than enough of me.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mark, for taking an hour to spend with us and our audience here, and thanks also for the great work you're doing in this field. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great.
If you are enjoying this program, please hit that subscribe button, or even better, leave a review. Your support makes it possible for us to create the quality programming that we're continually striving for.
Can I start? Is it recording?
It's already recording.
Oh, sorry. This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling. The practice of medicine or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician, patient, or clinical relationship The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time. You should say that.
No, that's good. That's for you to say it. I think that's very good. You like it? You want to do it one more time, or is that good? I think that was good.
Yes.
All right.
You need to save the recording.